You're about to experience Natural Born, an original short story from Set Free. Discover more captivating short stories at setfree.com. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story.
Chapter 1. The Mark of Nature. The morning alarm shrieked through Ian's cramped apartment, a sound as grating as the reality that awaited him beyond these thin walls. He rolled over, his 5 feet 9 inches frame unfolding from the narrow bed that served as both furniture and bitter reminder. In a world where height spoke before words ever could, Ian Blackwood carried his disadvantage like a visible scar. He stood before the cracked mirror in his bathroom, studying the face that marked him as naturally born. No perfect symmetry, no enhanced bone structure, no luminous skin that never aged. Just brown eyes that held too much understanding, and a jawline that nature had deemed adequate but unremarkable. His parents had done what they could with their meager savings, but genetic enhancement programs cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. The irony wasn't lost on him. Mira and David Blackwood had fled the purest colonies of their youth, communities that had rejected genetic modification for generations, only to discover that in the enhanced world of 2093, their natural child would be marked as inferior from birth. They'd broken away from everything they'd known, hoping to give their son a better life, only to doom him to a worse one. Ian's individual star rating glowed a humiliating 2.3 on his wrist display. The number followed him everywhere, broadcasting his inadequacy to anyone who cared to look. Enhanced individuals routinely scored 8s and 9s, their perfect genetics translating to perfect ratings in the algorithm that governed everything from employment to housing to love. Love. The word felt hollow in his mouth as he dressed for another day at the recycling plant. While enhanced men courted enhanced women with the casual confidence of those born to succeed, Ian had learned to expect rejection before he even spoke. Dating apps filtered him out automatically. Social gatherings became exercises in invisible walls and polite dismissals. But Ian possessed something the enhanced world couldn't quite quantify: emotional intelligence born from struggle. Every slight, every rejection, every reminder of his inadequacy had sharpened his ability to read people, to understand the subtle currents of human behavior that perfect algorithms missed. He'd learned to work twice as hard for half the recognition, developing a resilience that genetic modification couldn't engineer. The recycling plant hummed with the sound of machinery and the quiet conversations of the workers. Most of Ian's colleagues were naturals like himself, relegated to manual labor while the enhanced occupied the climate-controlled offices above. He'd been there 3 years, ever since completing his education at a second-tier institution that accepted students with lower ratings. Morning Ian called Rosa Martinez, a fellow natural whose star rating of 2.7 made her practically aristocracy among their kind. She operated the sorting machine with practiced efficiency, her unenhanced reflexes still quick enough for the work. "You hear about the new policies they're discussing upstairs?" "Let me guess," Ian replied, beginning his daily routine of equipment checks. "More restrictions on natural reproduction? Or maybe they're finally going to require enhancement licenses for employment? Worse. They're talking about mandatory genetic screening for all naturals. Say it's for public health optimization." Rosa's voice carried the bitter edge that all naturals developed when discussing their superiors. Ian's hands stilled on the machinery. He'd heard whispers of such policies in other districts, the slow erosion of what few rights naturals retained. The enhanced world viewed them as outdated models, genetic dead ends that consumed resources without contributing proportional value. The morning passed in mechanical routine until the lunch whistle blew. Ian usually ate alone, but today something drew him to the small park across from the plant. The enhanced district gleamed in the distance, its towers reaching toward a sky that seemed brighter above their perfect world. Every building stretched impossibly tall, designed for inhabitants who averaged nearly 7 feet in height, their perfect proportions making the architecture itself a monument to genetic superiority. That's when he saw her. She sat on a bench reading an actual paper book, an almost extinct sight in an age of neural interfaces and holographic displays. Her height marked her immediately as natural born, perhaps 5 feet 6 inches in a world where enhanced women averaged nearly 6 feet. But what struck Ian wasn't her stature or her unenhanced features. It was the way she held herself, as if she'd found peace in a world designed to deny it to people like them. Their eyes met across the small space, and Ian felt something shift in his chest. Not the desperate hope that usually accompanied his interactions with women, but something quieter and more dangerous. Recognition. She smiled, a genuine expression unmarked by the calculated perfection of enhanced features, and Ian found himself walking toward her before conscious thought could intervene. "Is it any good?" he asked, nodding toward the book. "Better than the neural feeds," she replied, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to push back against the cold efficiency of their world. "There's something about holding actual pages, don't you think? Like connecting to something real." Ian sat beside her, noting how the bench placed them at nearly equal height. "I'm Ian." "Elena," she said, closing the book but keeping her finger marking her place. "Elena Torres. And before you ask, yes, I'm natural born, and no, I don't apologize for it." The directness of her statement caught him off guard. Most naturals had learned to navigate their status with careful euphemisms and downcast eyes. Elena Torres faced her reality with the sort of quiet dignity that Ian had forgotten was possible. "What's your rating?" The question slipped out before he could stop it, the habitual anxiety of the perpetually measured. 1.8, she said without flinching. "Yours?" 2.3. She laughed, a sound that seemed to belong to a different world entirely. "Well, aren't we a pair of genetic disasters?" For the first time in months, Ian laughed too. Not the bitter humor that sustained him through most days, but something approaching joy. They talked until his lunch break ended, about books and dreams, and the small rebellions that kept naturals sane in an enhanced world. Elena worked at a textile facility in the Natural District, designing patterns by hand, while enhanced artists created with thought-guided neural interfaces. She lived alone in a studio apartment not far from Ian's building, having aged out of the group homes where low-rated naturals were warehoused until they could support themselves. "My parents were part of the early enhancement programs," she told him as they prepared to part ways. "But something went wrong during my development. Instead of enhancement, I got this." She gestured to herself, with no trace of self-pity. "They died when I was 12. Unrelated accident. But the state decided I wasn't worth the continued investment in private care." Ian felt the familiar rage that simmered beneath his surface whenever he encountered another story of the enhanced world's casual cruelty. But Elena's presence seemed to contain it, transforming his anger into something more purposeful. "Would you like to have dinner tomorrow?" he found himself asking. "I'd like that very much," she replied. As Ian walked back to the recycling plant, the enhanced towers seemed less imposing somehow. For the first time in years, he'd found someone who understood what it meant to be marked as inferior from birth, yet refused to accept that marking as truth. Elena Torres had looked at the world that had rejected them both and chosen dignity over despair. It was a choice that would change everything. Chapter 2. The Light and Darkness. The next 6 months transformed Ian's existence from mere survival to something approaching life. Elena brought color to his gray world, not through any enhanced beauty or genetically perfected charm, but through the simple miracle of being understood. They met whenever their work schedules allowed, finding joy in the small spaces the enhanced world overlooked. Late-night walks through the Natural District, where the buildings were shorter and the surveillance lighter. Weekend markets, where naturals sold handmade goods that couldn't compete with mass-produced perfection, but carried the irreplaceable mark of human imperfection. Elena's apartment became a sanctuary. Books lined makeshift shelves, their spines worn from actual reading. She cooked meals by hand, rather than ordering from the nutrient-optimized delivery services that fed most of the population. Her textile work covered the walls, patterns that spoke of human creativity unguided by algorithmic optimization. "You know what I love about your designs?" Ian said one evening as they sat on her floor, sharing a dinner she'd prepared from actual ingredients. "They're not perfect." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Such flattery." "No, I mean it. Look at this one." He pointed to a wall hanging that seemed to shift and flow despite being perfectly still. An enhanced artist would have made every line mathematically precise, every color exactly balanced. But yours has these little variations, these moments where the pattern breathes. She leaned against him, her head finding its natural place on his shoulder. "My supervisor keeps trying to get me to use the design programs, says I could triple my output with neural assistance, but then it wouldn't be yours anymore." "Exactly." She turned to look at him, her eyes serious. "Sometimes I think that's what they really want. Not to make us better, but to make us disappear entirely. Turn us all into perfect copies of their perfect ideal." Ian's arms tightened around her. The rage that had simmered in him for years had found a strange peace in Elena's presence, but it hadn't disappeared. If anything, having something precious to protect had made him more aware of the threat surrounding them. Their relationship deepened slowly, carefully. Both had learned not to trust easily in a world that punished authenticity. But gradually, they began to build something that felt revolutionary simply by existing, a love based on genuine connection rather than genetic compatibility scores. Ian found himself working harder at the recycling plant, not from any sudden enthusiasm for the job, but because Elena's presence in his life had given him a reason to hope for something better. She encouraged him to apply for advancement positions, to believe that his natural intelligence and work ethic might eventually overcome his genetic disadvantages. "You see patterns differently than enhanced people," she told him one evening as they walked through the natural district's modest commercial area. "They're optimized for efficiency, but you understand systems, how they work, where they break down, how to fix them. Enhanced managers don't want naturals thinking about systems," Ian replied, though her confidence in him was intoxicating. "They want us following instructions." "Then maybe we need different managers." It was a dangerous thought, the kind of sentiment that could be reported and punished. But Elena said it with such matter-of-fact certainty that it didn't sound like sedition. It sounded like obvious truth. As their relationship grew stronger, Ian began to notice the small rebellions that kept naturals sane in an enhanced world. Rosa Martinez shared information about enhanced policies before they were officially announced. David Kim, who worked maintenance in enhanced facilities, sometimes adjusted environmental controls to make their perfect buildings slightly less comfortable. Even Marcus Webb, with his gray market information services, was engaged in quiet resistance to enhanced authority. "There are more of us than you might think," Marcus told Ian during one of their irregular meetings. The information broker had become something of a friend, though their relationship was built on mutual utility rather than genuine affection. Naturals who've learned to navigate their systems, enhanced individuals who question their society's direction. "Enhanced individuals?" Ian asked. "A few. Mostly in the research sectors. People who understand the psychological costs of genetic optimization. There's a geneticist I've dealt with occasionally, Dr. Sarah Vance. She's troubled by some of the applications of her work." Ian filed the information away, unsure why Marcus was sharing it, but sensing it might be important someday. The idea that enhanced individuals might question their own system seemed almost impossible, but Marcus wasn't given to wishful thinking. They'd been together 8 months when Elena told him about the collectors. "What do you mean, collected?" Ian asked, his voice carefully controlled. They were in his apartment this time, Elena curled against him on his narrow bed. She'd been quiet all evening, and he'd finally coaxed the source of her worry from her. "Sasha from work," Elena said, her voice small. "She was beautiful, you know. Natural born, but beautiful in a way that made people look twice. Last week she didn't show up. Her supervisor said she'd been reassigned to private service. But Martina in processing said she saw Sasha being escorted by enhanced security. Not arrested, just collected." Ian's blood went cold. He'd heard whispers, rumors dismissed as paranoid fantasy, stories of naturals disappearing, particularly attractive ones, particularly those who might appeal to enhanced individuals seeking novelty. "Elena, look at me." He turned her face toward his. "Has anyone approached you? Anyone from the enhanced districts?" She shook her head, but he could see the fear in her eyes. "No, but, Ian, what if it's not just rumors? What if they really are taking people?" He held her closer, his mind racing. Elena was extraordinary, not just to him, but objectively. Her natural beauty had an authenticity that enhanced perfection couldn't replicate. In a world of artificial symmetry, her genuine features would stand out like a flame in darkness. "We'll be careful," he promised. "We'll watch out for each other." But being careful wasn't enough. Over the following weeks, more stories emerged. Naturals disappearing from their jobs, their homes, their lives. Official explanations always sounded reasonable. Voluntary relocations, private employment opportunities, family emergencies. But the pattern was unmistakable to anyone willing to see it. The enhanced world had grown bored with its own perfection. Decades of genetic optimization had created a population of beautiful, intelligent, physically superior individuals who all looked vaguely similar. The same enhanced bone structure, the same optimized proportions, the same perfectly balanced features. Elena learned about the underground trade through whispered conversations at work, fragments of information that painted a horrifying picture. Enhanced individuals, seeking novelty in their perfect lives, had developed a taste for authentic genetics. Natural-born humans, with their flaws and variations, had become exotic commodities. "They have private clubs," Elena told Ian one evening, her voice barely audible. "Places where enhanced people can experience what they call genetic tourism. Naturals are brought in as entertainment, as curiosities, as objects. That's slavery, Ian said flatly. No, it's legal. They use private service contracts, cultural exchange programs, voluntary relocation agreements. The paperwork makes it look legitimate. Ian felt something cold and sharp settling in his chest. The enhanced world's casual cruelty had found new depths, new ways to dehumanize people who were already struggling to maintain their dignity. How do we protect ourselves? He asked. Elena was quiet for a long moment. We can't. Not really. If they want someone, they take them. The system protects their choices, not ours. That night, Ian lay awake listening to Elena's breathing, thinking about the world they lived in and the future they might have together. For 8 months, he'd allowed himself to believe that love could exist despite the enhanced world's hostility. Now he understood that love itself made them targets. The enhanced world could tolerate naturals as an underclass, as workers and servants, and genetic dead ends. But they couldn't tolerate naturals who found happiness, who built authentic relationships, who proved that genetic perfection wasn't necessary for human fulfillment. Elena's happiness made her dangerous. Their love made them both vulnerable. 3 weeks after Elena's confession about the collectors, she didn't return from work. Ian waited at her apartment until midnight, then until dawn, called her workplace, where a board supervisor informed him that Elena Torres had been selected for a special assignment and wouldn't be returning to regular duties. Selected by whom? Ian demanded. That's confidential information, the supervisor replied, and disconnected. Ian spent the next 48 hours in a state of controlled panic, calling every number he could find, visiting every office that might have records. The enhanced bureaucracy smiled at him with polite sympathy and offered no information. The rage he'd kept contained for months began to surface, but it was different now. Not the unfocused anger of someone frustrated by life's unfairness, but something sharper and more purposeful. Elena had been taken because she was beautiful and natural and happy. She'd been stolen because their love proved that enhanced genetics weren't necessary for human worth. On the 3rd day, he found Marcus Webb. Marcus was a natural like Ian, but one who'd learned to navigate the enhanced world through different means. He worked in the gray zones, providing services that enhanced citizens required but wouldn't acknowledge. Information, access, things that fell through the cracks of their perfect system. She's been placed with a collector named Vincent Hale, Marcus told him, his voice flat with professional detachment. High-rated enhanced, old money family. Has a thing for authentic genetics, particularly females. Ian's hands clenched into fists. Where? Ian, don't do what you're thinking of doing. These people have security, legal protection, political connections. You can't just... Where is she? Marcus looked at him for a long moment, perhaps recognizing something dangerous in Ian's stillness. The Pinnacle District. Hale owns the top floors of the Meridian Tower. But Ian, listen to me. She signed a contract. Legally, she's there voluntarily. Bullshit. I know it's bullshit. You know it's bullshit. But the law doesn't care what we know. Marcus paused, studying Ian's face. If you're really going to do this, you'll need help. That enhanced contact I mentioned, Dr. Vance. She might be willing to provide access codes, security information. She's been asking questions about the collection networks. Ian left Marcus's office with an address and the beginnings of a plan. He'd worked in enhanced buildings during his education, part of a work-study program that placed naturals in service positions. He knew their security systems, their blind spots, their assumptions about what people like him were capable of. The woman he loved was trapped in a tower that scraped the sky, held captive by people who viewed her as an exotic pet. Every hour she remained, there was another hour of violation, another piece of her spirit being systematically destroyed. For 8 months, Elena had taught him that love was possible in an impossible world. Now he would learn what love demanded when that impossibility revealed its true face. But first, he would need to contact Dr. Sarah Vance and discover whether enhanced consciences were more than just theoretical possibilities. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. The Meridian Tower rose, like a crystal spear, into the enhanced district's perpetual twilight. Ian spent 2 days watching the patterns, memorizing the guards' routines, identifying the service entrances that someone with his clearance level might access. The building was a monument to enhanced superiority, its gleaming surfaces reflecting a sky that seemed cleaner above their perfect world. He made his way to the 70th floor, using a maintenance badge he'd acquired through methods Marcus had taught him. The hallways were wider here, the air cleaner, everything designed for people who'd been optimized for greatness. Enhanced individuals moved through these spaces with the casual confidence of those who'd never questioned their right to exist in beauty. Ian felt like an intruder in his own species' world. His 5 feet 9 inches frame seemed to shrink in corridors built for 7-foot giants. His unenhanced features felt crude compared to the mathematical perfection of the faces that passed him without acknowledgement. He found Elena in a room that might have been called a bedroom if prisons could be beautiful. She was alive. The relief nearly dropped him to his knees. But the Elena who turned toward him wasn't the woman he'd fallen in love with. Fear had hollowed her out, leaving behind someone who looked like Elena but moved like a broken thing. "Ian?" Her voice was a whisper. "How did you—" "We're leaving. Right now." "We can't. The contract." "Fuck the contract." He'd never heard Elena cry before. Even in their darkest conversations about the enhanced world's cruelties, she'd maintained a dignity that kept despair at bay. But now she sobbed against his chest while he held her and planned violence against anyone who tried to stop them from leaving. "What did they do to you?" he asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. They wanted me to be grateful," Elena whispered. "Said I should feel honored to serve enhanced citizens, that this was the highest purpose a natural could achieve. Vincent kept talking about how I was authentic in ways he could never be, how my imperfections were exotic." Ian's rage crystallized into something cold and sharp. Vincent Hale hadn't just taken Elena's body. He'd tried to break her spirit, to make her complicit in her own dehumanization. But there was something else in Elena's words, something that suggested a deeper pathology in the enhanced world. They made it to the service elevator before Vincent Hale found them. He was everything Ian had expected, and worse. Enhanced perfection in a tailored suit, confidence radiating from every optimized cell. Nearly 7 feet tall with features that belonged in classical sculptures, the kind of man who'd never questioned his right to anything he desired. "Ms. Torres," Hale said, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to obedience, "you're in violation of your service agreement." "She is coming with me," Ian said, stepping between Elena and the enhanced man. Hale looked at Ian as if noticing him for the first time. The enhanced man's perfect features registered surprise, then amusement, then something approaching contempt. "And you are?" "Someone who's going to break every enhanced bone in your body if you don't step aside." Hale laughed, the sound carrying no humor. "A natural? Threatening me?" He touched something on his wrist, and Ian heard the elevator locks engage. "Do you have any idea what you're interfering with? Ms. Torres has a legal obligation." "Elena has a name," Ian interrupted. "Use it." "Elena," Hale said, drawing out the syllables with mock courtesy, "has chosen to honor her genetic heritage by serving those superior to her. This is what naturals were designed for." That was when Ian discovered what 3 years of rage could do to a human body when properly motivated. The enhanced man's genetic optimizations had made him stronger, faster, more resilient than any natural. His reflexes were quicker, his muscles more efficient, his bones more durable. But they hadn't prepared him for the kind of violence that came from absolute desperation. Ian fought like someone with nothing left to lose, because that's exactly what he was. His first punch caught Hale in the throat, disrupting the enhanced man's breathing. His second shattered the perfect nose that had been engineered for aesthetic appeal. His third and fourth and fifth came so fast that Hale's superior reflexes couldn't compensate for the sheer ferocity of the assault. Enhanced genetics could optimize the human body, but they couldn't prepare someone for fighting an opponent who was willing to die if it meant taking his enemy with him. When the security guards arrived, they found Vincent Hale unconscious and bleeding, Ian standing over him with knuckles that would never quite heal right, and Elena Torres staring at the man she loved as if seeing him clearly for the first time. They escaped. Somehow, through methods Ian would never fully remember, they made it out of the tower and back to the natural district. But something fundamental had broken that couldn't be repaired. Elena was different. The spark that had drawn Ian to her had been carefully extinguished during her weeks in captivity. She spoke in whispers, jumped at sudden sounds, and looked at Ian with something that might have been gratitude, but felt like fear. "I keep thinking about what he said," she told Ian, a week after their escape. They were in his apartment, but she sat apart from him, as if physical closeness had become threatening. About naturals being designed to serve enhanced people, about being authentic in ways they could never be. "Elena, you can't believe that." "Can't I? But Ian, what if there's truth in it? Not the serving part, but the authenticity part." Vincent kept talking about how enhanced people had lost something in their optimization, how they all looked the same, thought the same, felt the same. How being with me made him feel real. Ian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. What are you saying? I think they're broken, Ian. Not physically, but psychologically. They optimized themselves into perfection, but they lost whatever makes life meaningful. The struggle, the uncertainty, the possibility of failure or genuine surprise. They created paradise and discovered it was hell. It was a disturbing insight, one that suggested the enhanced world's cruelty might stem not from malice, but from profound emptiness. People who'd been engineered for happiness but had never learned what happiness actually required. That doesn't excuse what they did to you. No, but it explains it. They collect us because we remind them of what they used to be before they perfected themselves into hollowness. We're not just exotic to them, Ian. We're proof that they made a terrible mistake. The enhanced world's response to Ian's assault on Vincent Hale was swift and comprehensive. Enhanced security forces began patrolling natural districts more aggressively. New regulations required naturals to carry identification at all times, to submit to random genetic screenings, to report any contact with enhanced citizens. They're tightening the screws, Rosa Martinez told Ian during one of their lunch breaks, making sure no other natural gets ideas about fighting back. Ian nodded, only half listening. His attention was focused on Elena, who sat alone at the far end of the park where they'd first met. She came here every day now, reading the same book over and over, as if trying to find her way back to the person she'd been before Vincent Hale. You need to let her go, Rosa said quietly. What? Elena, you need to let her heal on her own terms, not yours. I'm not pressuring her. I'm giving her space. You're hovering, watching her like she's gonna break. Maybe she needs to break. Maybe that's part of healing. Ian wanted to argue, but Rosa was right. His presence had become another burden for Elena to carry, another reminder of what had been taken from her. His love, which had once been a source of strength, now felt like an obligation she couldn't fulfill. That night, he told Elena he was going away for a while. Where? She asked, though her voice carried no real interest. Does it matter? She looked at him for a long moment, and for just an instant, he saw a flicker of the woman he'd loved. I want to get better, Ian. I want to be who I was before. But I can't do it with you watching me try. I know. I'm not saying goodbye forever. I'm saying I need time to remember who Elena Torres is, without Vincent Hale's voice in my head. Ian kissed her forehead, a gesture as gentle as he could manage. Take all the time you need. He left the next morning, telling himself it was temporary, that Elena would heal and they would find their way back to each other. He moved to a different district, found work at another recycling facility, tried to build a life that didn't revolve around waiting for someone who might never return. But Elena's insights about enhanced psychology haunted him. If she was right, if the enhanced world's cruelty stemmed from their own profound emptiness, then the entire conflict might be more complex than simple oppression. It might be the desperate flailing of people who'd optimized away their own humanity and were trying to reclaim it through the suffering of others. 3 months later, Marcus Webb brought him the news. They found her this morning, Marcus said, his professional detachment cracking slightly. Apparent suicide. I'm sorry, Ian. The words hit him like physical blows. Elena, who'd faced a hostile world with quiet dignity, who'd found beauty in imperfection, who'd been the light that kept his darkness at bay. It wasn't suicide, Ian said, his voice perfectly calm. Ian, they killed her. Maybe not directly, but they killed her. Took everything that made her Elena and left behind someone who couldn't live with what was left. Marcus nodded slowly. What are you going to do? Ian looked at his friend, this man who'd learned to survive by staying invisible, by providing services without asking questions, by accepting the world as it was rather than fighting for what it should be. The rage that had simmered in Ian for years was gone now, burned away by grief into something colder and more dangerous. Elena had died believing she was inferior, worthless, designed to serve people who viewed her as less than human. The enhanced world had won, not just by taking her body, but by poisoning her soul with their own emptiness. I'm going to make them understand what they've done, Ian said quietly. I'm going to show them exactly what they are. And what's that? Ian thought about Elena's smile, her laugh, her stubborn insistence on finding beauty in an ugly world. He thought about Vincent Hale's perfect features and casual cruelty, his desperate need for authenticity that he could only find through exploitation. He thought about a system so efficient at crushing human dignity that it could make someone like Elena believe she deserved to suffer. Hollow, Ian said. They're hollow people who've forgotten what it means to be human. And it's time someone filled that emptiness with exactly what they've earned. Chapter 4. building the fire. The natural district had its own underground, networks of communication and support that the enhanced world either ignored or actively suppressed. Ian had known of their existence peripherally, the way all naturals knew that somewhere people were organizing, resisting, planning. But he'd never sought them out, never imagined he'd need them. Elena's death changed everything. He found them through Rosa Martinez, who worked alongside him at the recycling plant but lived a double life after hours. She led him through a maze of abandoned buildings to a basement meeting room where 30 naturals sat in folding chairs, discussing strategies that would have been called sedition if the enhanced world had bothered to listen. "This is Ian Blackwood," Rosa announced to the group. Elena Torres was his partner. The name carried weight in these circles. Elena's story had spread through the natural community like wildfire, one more casualty in an undeclared war. Ian saw recognition in their faces, and something else, expectation. The group's leader was a woman named Sarah Lynn, her 1.9 rating marking her as one of the severely disadvantaged. But her intelligence blazed from eyes that had learned to see patterns the enhanced world preferred to ignore. "We've been documenting cases like Elena's for 2 years," Sarah told him after the meeting had dispersed. "The collector network is larger than most people realize. Vincent Hale was small-time compared to some of them." "How many?" Ian asked. "We've confirmed 87 disappearances in this district alone. Probably twice that number we can't verify." Sarah pulled out a tablet, its screen showing a network diagram that resembled a spider web. "They have a whole system. Scouts who identify targets, legal frameworks for acquisition, private facilities for housing. It's not random violence, Ian. It's organized exploitation." Ian studied the diagram, his analytical mind automatically identifying weak points and vulnerabilities. The enhanced world's arrogance was their weakness. They assumed naturals were too beaten down, too disorganized, too inferior to pose any real threat. "What have you done about it?" he asked. Sarah's expression hardened. "We filed reports, submitted evidence, requested investigations. The enhanced authorities acknowledge our concerns and promise to look into it. Nothing changes. Because they don't want it to change." "Exactly." Sarah leaned forward. "The legal system, the enforcement agencies, the political structure, they're all enhanced. We're asking our oppressors to police themselves." Ian was quiet for a long moment, processing information and possibilities. Around him, other resistance members were engaged in passionate discussions about documentation strategies and legal challenges. Their energy was admirable, but Ian could see the futility in their approaches. "You're all thinking too small," he said finally. The room fell silent. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? You're trying to work within their system? File reports with their agencies? Appeal to their sense of justice? Hope they'll suddenly develop consciences they've never possessed?" Ian stood up, feeling the weight of 30 pairs of eyes on him. "They created this system. They benefit from it. They're never going to reform it voluntarily." "So what do you suggest?" asked David Kim, a maintenance worker whose soft voice belied the intensity in his eyes. "We stop asking for justice and start taking it." The suggestion sparked immediate debate. Some resistance members recoiled from the implication of violence, clinging to moral high ground that felt increasingly meaningless. Others leaned forward with interest, tired of peaceful approaches that had yielded nothing but more victims. "Violence will only give them excuse for greater oppression," argued Lisa Wong, a natural who worked in enhanced educational facilities. "They'll use our aggression to justify whatever they want to do to us." "They don't need justification," Ian replied. "They took Elena without justification. They'll take more of us regardless of how peaceful we remain. The only question is whether we make them pay a price for it." Sarah studied Ian carefully. "What kind of price are you talking about?" Ian thought about Vincent Hale's perfect features, his casual assumption of superiority, his surprise that a natural would dare to resist. "Fear. Make them afraid. Show them that actions have consequences, even for enhanced citizens." "And how exactly do we make genetically superior people afraid of us?" Ian smiled, and several people in the room shifted uncomfortably. There was something in his expression that suggested he'd already given this considerable thought. "We use their psychology against them. Enhanced individuals are emotionally fragile, dependent on systems that maintain their sense of superiority. Disrupt those systems, and they don't adapt well." Over the following weeks, Ian became a regular at the resistance meetings. But unlike the others, who spoke in theoretical terms about justice and reform, Ian focused on practical questions of leverage and vulnerability. He studied the enhanced world with the same analytical intensity he'd once applied to recycling plant machinery. The breakthrough came when David Kim mentioned his work maintaining enhanced residential buildings. "I see everything," David said during one late-night planning session. Their private communications, their social networks, their business dealings. Enhanced people assume service workers are invisible. What kind of things do you see? Ian asked. Financial irregularities, genetic enhancement fraud, rating manipulation, and yes, collection activities. Enhanced citizens discussing natural acquisitions like they're talking about buying art. Ian leaned forward with interest. They document these activities? Extensively. Photos, videos, financial records. They're proud of their collections. They share them with friends, post them on private networks, treat it like a hobby. Because they don't think anyone's watching. Exactly. Who's going to report enhanced citizens? Other enhanced citizens who are doing the same things? Natural service workers who could lose their jobs? Or worse. Ian felt something click into place. The enhanced world's greatest vulnerability wasn't their physical bodies or their technological systems. It was their reputation. Their entire social structure depended on maintaining the fiction that they were morally superior beings deserving of their elevated status. What would happen if that documentation became public? Ian asked. Sarah frowned. Public how? Enhanced media won't broadcast anything that makes them look bad. Natural districts don't have access to enhanced communication networks. But enhanced citizens do. Ian said quietly. What if we could broadcast directly into their social networks? Force them to confront evidence of their own cruelty? The plan that emerged over the following month was ambitious and dangerous. It required technical skills the resistance didn't possess, access to systems they couldn't penetrate, and a level of coordination that the natural underground had never attempted. But Ian had advantages the others lacked. His work-study experience in enhanced facilities had taught him their security protocols. His analytical mind could identify weaknesses in their systems. And his absolute lack of concern for his own safety made him willing to take risks that more cautious resistors avoided. We'll need inside help, David said as they refined their strategy. Someone with enhanced credentials who can access their secure networks. I might know someone, Marcus Webb said quietly. He'd been attending meetings since Ian's arrival, his information network proving invaluable to their planning. There are enhanced individuals who aren't comfortable with the collection system. Not many, but some. Enough to help us? Maybe, if we approach them carefully. The first enhanced contact was Dr. Sarah Vance, a geneticist who worked in the research facilities that had developed the enhancement technologies. Marcus arranged a clandestine meeting in a natural district cafe where her towering height and perfect features made her as conspicuous as a lighthouse. Why are you here? Ian asked without preamble. Dr. Vance looked uncomfortable, her enhanced social programming struggling with the moral complexity of the situation. Because I helped create the genetic modifications that made this hierarchy possible. I thought we were improving humanity. I didn't realize we were creating a caste system. But you benefited from it. Yes. She didn't flinch from the accusation. I lived well, earned prestigious positions, enjoyed all the privileges of enhanced status. But I also saw what happened to the naturals who served in our facilities. The dismissive attitudes, the casual cruelty, the assumption that genetic differences justified social oppression. Ian studied her for a long moment. Enhanced features made reading expressions difficult. Too much symmetry, too little variation in the micro-expressions that revealed true emotion. But something in her voice suggested genuine remorse. What are you willing to do about it? Whatever it takes to stop this. The alliance between natural resistors and enhanced dissidents changed everything. Dr. Vance provided access to secure networks and classified information. Other enhanced contacts followed, each carrying their own burden of guilt and desire for redemption. But as the resistance grew, so did the enhanced world's awareness of the threat. Security measures increased. Natural districts faced more aggressive surveillance. Random arrests became common, designed to disrupt organizing efforts and intimidate potential resistors. They know something's happening, Sarah reported during a meeting 6 weeks into their collaboration. Enhanced security forces have been asking questions about natural social networks, communication patterns, possible organizational activities. How much time do we have? Ian asked. Unknown. But not long. If they identify our leadership, this whole effort collapses. Ian nodded grimly. They'd made significant progress in building their network and developing operational capabilities. But they weren't ready for a major confrontation. The resistance needed more time to prepare, more resources to sustain extended conflict. That night, Vincent Hale solved Ian's timing problem for him. The enhanced man had recovered from Ian's assault and returned to his collection activities with renewed enthusiasm. But now he was being more careful, more systematic, more sophisticated in his methods. His new target was Rosa Martinez. Ian learned about it through Dr. Vance, who'd intercepted communications on enhanced social networks discussing Rosa's acquisition. Hale had identified her as Ian's closest friend, someone whose disappearance would send a message to other potential resistors. "He's using her as bait," Dr. Vance explained during an emergency meeting, "hoping you'll try another rescue attempt so his security forces can eliminate you." "When?" Ian asked. "Tomorrow night. Rosa's been assigned to work late shift maintenance in the Meridian Tower. Hale's people will intercept her on her way home." Ian felt a familiar cold rage settling in his chest. Elena's death had taught him that the enhanced world would never stop taking people he cared about. They viewed natural relationships as weaknesses to exploit, emotions to manipulate, bonds to sever whenever convenient. "Can we warn her?" Sarah asked. "Warning her won't solve the problem," Ian replied. "Hale will just target someone else, and eventually, he'll succeed." "So what do we do?" Ian looked around the room at the faces, watching him expectantly. These people had joined the resistance, hoping for justice, for reform, for gradual change that would improve natural lives without requiring too much sacrifice. They were about to learn that some problems couldn't be solved through peaceful means. "We end this," Ian said quietly. "All of it. Tonight." Chapter 5. The Point of No Return. The plan Ian conceived was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. For months, the resistance had been building networks and gathering intelligence, preparing for some theoretical future confrontation. But Vincent Hale's targeting of Rosa had accelerated everything, forcing them into action before they were truly ready. "We're going to expose them all," Ian announced to the assembled resistance leadership. "Every collector, every facility, every enhanced citizen who's participated in this system. Make it impossible for them to pretend ignorance anymore." The basement meeting room felt smaller than usual, packed with both natural resistors and their enhanced allies. Dr. Vance sat beside Marcus Webb, her 7-foot frame making the folding chair look like children's furniture. David Kim had brought 2 other maintenance workers who'd volunteered to help with the technical aspects of their operation. "Exposure hasn't worked before," Sarah Lynn pointed out. "We've documented abuses, submitted evidence, broadcast testimonies. The enhanced world ignores whatever doesn't fit their narrative." "Because we've been polite about it," Ian replied. "We've followed their rules, used their systems, appealed to their better nature. Time for a different approach." He outlined his strategy. Instead of gathering evidence to submit through official channels, they would hijack the enhanced communication networks directly. Every screen in the enhanced districts would display documentation of the collection system. Social platforms, entertainment feeds, business communications, all of them carrying messages that couldn't be ignored or suppressed. "The enhanced world depends on maintaining the fiction that they're morally superior," Ian explained. "Force them to confront evidence of their own cruelty, and that fiction collapses. Some will try to justify it, others will embrace it, but some will reject it entirely." "And then what?" asked Dr. Vance. "Civil war," Ian said simply. "Enhanced society tears itself apart arguing about whether naturals deserve to be treated as human beings. While they're fighting each other, we build something better." The room fell silent as people processed the implications. This wasn't just resistance anymore. It was revolution. The kind of systematic upheaval that would reshape their entire world, with consequences no one could predict. "The technical requirements are significant," David Kim said finally. "We'll need to penetrate multiple secure networks simultaneously, upload massive amounts of data, maintain broadcasts despite countermeasures. It's possible, but barely." "What about the response?" Sarah asked. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Enhanced security forces will come after all of us." Ian had been thinking about this constantly since Elena's death. The enhanced world's response would be swift and brutal, but it would also be revealing. Every excessive reaction, every violation of their stated principles, would prove the resistance's point about the fundamental nature of enhanced society. "Let them come," he said. "Every natural they arrest, every right they violate, every mask they drop, it all gets broadcast in real time. We make their oppression visible to anyone still capable of shame." Dr. Vance leaned forward. "Ian, I understand your anger. What happened to Elena was unconscionable. But what you're proposing will get people killed. Lots of people. People are already dying." Ian's voice carried an edge that made the room feel colder. "Elena died. Sasha died. How many others have died while we sat in meetings and filed reports? The enhanced world is already at war with us. We're just finally fighting back. The vote wasn't unanimous, But it was decisive. The resistance would move forward with Ian's plan, knowing it meant crossing a line from which there could be no return. Over the next week, they worked with desperate intensity. David Kim and his team installed monitoring equipment in enhanced facilities, hidden transmitters that could hijack communication networks. Dr. Vance provided access codes and security protocols. Marcus Webb coordinated with resistance cells in other districts, building a network capable of simultaneous broadcasts across multiple cities. Ian found himself at the center of it all, not as a designated leader, but as the driving force that kept everyone focused on their impossible task. His combination of analytical intelligence and absolute ruthlessness made him uniquely suited to the kind of asymmetric warfare they were preparing to wage. "You've changed," Rosa observed during one of their planning sessions. She'd been assigned to work with Ian on targeting priorities, identifying which enhanced facilities would have the greatest psychological impact. "Elena's death changed me," Ian replied without looking up from the tactical displays. "No, it's more than that. You've become harder, like you've stopped caring about anything except winning." Ian paused in his work, considering her words. What's the alternative? Care about things that can be taken away? Hope for mercy from people who view us as property? Elena cared. Elena hoped. Elena believed in the possibility of justice through peaceful means. And she's dead, killed by a system that we've been trying to reform instead of destroy. Rosa was quiet for a moment. She wouldn't want you to become a monster to avenge her. Then she shouldn't have fallen in love with someone capable of becoming one. The first strike came on a Thursday evening, as enhanced citizens across the city settled in for their evening entertainment. Screens in homes, offices, restaurants, and social clubs began displaying footage that the enhanced world had never intended for public consumption. Vincent Hale was featured prominently, of course. Video documentation of his collection facilities, financial records showing payments for private services, communications with other collectors discussing their latest acquisitions. But he was just one name among dozens, part of a comprehensive network that included politicians, business leaders, cultural figures, and ordinary enhanced citizens who had participated in the trade. The footage was devastating. Enhanced individuals watching naturals being cataloged like livestock, subjected to degrading treatments, broken down psychologically until they accepted their status as property. Hours of documentation that revealed the collection system as systematic dehumanization on an industrial scale. But the broadcast didn't stop with the collectors. They included the legal framework that enabled the trade, the political decisions that protected it, the social attitudes that normalized it. Enhanced viewers found themselves confronting evidence that their entire society was built on foundations of exploitation and cruelty. Ian watched the chaos unfold from the Resistance Command Center, monitoring feeds from across the city as enhanced districts erupted in confusion and panic. Communication networks crashed under the volume of traffic as enhanced citizens desperately tried to process what they were seeing. "It's working," Marcus reported, his voice carrying a note of amazement. "The enhanced social networks are exploding. Some defending the system, others expressing horror, most just complete confusion." Phase 2, Ian ordered. The second wave of broadcasts began an hour later, as enhanced security forces mobilized to suppress the initial transmissions. But instead of propaganda or political messages, these broadcasts showed something more immediate and threatening: real-time surveillance footage of enhanced citizens' private activities. Business meetings where natural exploitation was discussed casually. Social gatherings where collection activities were planned. Private communications revealing the widespread nature of enhanced participation in the trade. Enhanced viewers discovered that their most intimate conversations had been monitored, recorded, and compiled into evidence of their complicity. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Enhanced individuals, accustomed to absolute privacy and social superiority, found themselves exposed and vulnerable in ways they'd never imagined possible. Their perfect worlds suddenly felt hostile and unpredictable. Security forces are converging on natural districts, Dr. Vance reported from her position monitoring enhanced military communications. Mass arrests, property seizures, suspension of legal protections. They're implementing martial law. Perfect, Ian said, his voice cold with satisfaction. Broadcast it all. The third phase of their operation captured every moment of the enhanced world's authoritarian response. Military forces dragging naturals from their homes, suspension of legal rights, establishment of detention facilities. Enhanced viewers watched their society abandon any pretense of moral superiority in favor of naked oppression. But something unexpected was happening in the enhanced districts. Dr. Vance's reports indicated growing divisions within enhanced society itself, as significant numbers began questioning the system they'd always accepted. Resistance cells are forming, she announced during an emergency coordination meeting. Enhanced citizens who refuse to participate in the crackdown, trying to protect natural populations in their areas. How many? Ian asked. Unknown, but growing rapidly. Maybe 15% of the enhanced population, possibly more. Ian felt a grim satisfaction. This had been the outcome he'd hoped for but hadn't dared expect. The enhanced world was tearing itself apart, exactly as he'd predicted. Put me in contact with their leadership, he said. The conversation took place through encrypted channels, but the substance was clear. A significant faction of enhanced citizens, horrified by the revelations in their society's response, were organizing active resistance to the martial law crackdown. We want to end this, their representative said. Whatever it takes to stop the oppression, to build something better. Why? Ian asked. You benefit from the current system. Why give that up? Because we've seen what we really are, what our society has always been, and we can't live with it anymore. The alliance between natural and enhanced resistors changed the nature of the conflict entirely. Enhanced dissidents provided access to military communications, classified intelligence, and secure facilities. Natural resistors provided operational expertise and the moral authority of the oppressed. Working together, they began coordinating responses to the martial law crackdown that neither group could have achieved alone. Enhanced citizens used their access to warn natural populations about impending raids. Natural resistors provided safe houses and communication networks for enhanced dissidents fleeing their own security forces. But Ian knew the enhanced world wouldn't tolerate this level of disruption indefinitely. Their response would escalate beyond martial law to something more final and irreversible. He was right. They're discussing biological weapons, Dr. Vance reported during a coordination meeting 3 weeks into the uprising. Targeted viruses designed to eliminate natural genetics entirely. Complete extermination of the unenhanced population. Ian felt a familiar cold rage settling in his chest, but this time it was different. Not the personal fury he'd experienced over Elena's death, but something larger and more purposeful. The enhanced world had revealed its true nature, a system so committed to genetic supremacy that it would rather commit genocide than accept equality. Timeline, he asked. Weeks, not months. The weapons are in final development stages. They could deploy within days once testing is complete. Ian stood at the window of their underground command center, looking up toward the enhanced districts that glowed with artificial light against the darkened sky. Somewhere up there, enhanced scientists were perfecting weapons designed to exterminate everyone who shared Elena's genetic heritage. The resistance had accomplished more than he'd ever imagined possible. They'd exposed the enhanced world's cruelty, triggered a civil war within enhanced society, and built an alliance between oppressed and oppressor that proved cooperation was possible. But it wouldn't be enough. Not against biological weapons, not against systematic genocide. There's one facility, Dr. Vance continued quietly, where the primary research is being conducted. If someone could destroy it, set back the program significantly. Ian turned back to the room, where his allies watched him with expressions ranging from hope to fear. These people had followed him from peaceful resistance to open revolution, trusting his judgment even when it led them into increasingly dangerous territory. Now he was going to ask them to trust him one final time. Where? He asked. But even as Dr. Vance provided the location, Ian was thinking about Elena. Not as she'd been in Hale's captivity, broken and defeated, but as she'd existed in those perfect months when they'd found light in a dark world. She believed in the possibility of justice, in the capacity for people to change, in the power of love to survive in an impossible world. He was about to prove her wrong on all counts. Chapter 6. The Monster's Embrace. The biological weapons facility was located in the Enhanced District's industrial sector, a gleaming complex that produced medical treatments and genetic therapies for the enhanced population. It was also, according to intelligence provided by Dr. Vance, the site where weapons designed to target natural genetics were being developed. Ian studied the facility's schematics in the pre-dawn darkness, surrounded by a mixed team of natural and enhanced resistors. The collaboration still felt surreal, working alongside people who'd been his genetic superiors just months earlier, now united by necessity and shared moral purpose. Security is significant, but manageable, reported Dr. Vance, her enhanced features unable to quite hide her fear. They assume no one would be foolish enough to attack a biological weapons facility, but they're not taking chances anymore. How long do we have once we're inside? Ian asked. The weapons are in final testing phases. If we can destroy the research data and the prototype samples, we set them back months, maybe years. And if we can't? Dr. Vance's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They could deploy within days. Atmospheric dispersal, water supply contamination, direct injection through medical systems. Natural genetics would be extinct within weeks. Ian nodded grimly. The stakes had escalated beyond revolution to species survival. Elena's death had started him on this path, but now he was fighting for every natural human who would never have the chance to fall in love, to create something beautiful, to find meaning in an imperfect world. The assault began at 4 a.m., when enhanced security forces were at their lowest alert level. Ian's team moved through the facility with deadly efficiency, enhanced reflexes, and natural determination, combining to overcome defensive measures that had been designed to stop conventional attacks. They found the weapons in Laboratory 7, rows of sealed containers holding engineered viruses that could distinguish between enhanced and natural genetics. The research data filled multiple servers, decades of work, aimed at the systematic elimination of unenhanced humanity. This is it, Dr. Vance said, her voice hollow with horror as she examined the containment systems. Everything they need to commit genocide. They've even tested it on tissue samples. The mortality rate for natural genetics is nearly 100%. Ian planted the explosive charges with methodical precision, while his team gathered what intelligence they could salvage. The plan was simple: destroy the weapons, steal the research data for evidence, and broadcast proof of the enhanced world's genocidal intentions to any population that still harbored illusions about their oppressor's moral restraint. But as he worked, Ian's analytical mind was calculating something his team couldn't see. The facility wasn't just a research center. It was connected to the enhanced district's main chemical processing infrastructure. The same systems that produced enhancement treatments and medical supplies for the perfect world above. They were preparing to leave when the facility's alarms began screaming. Security response, Marcus Webb reported through their communication system. Enhanced military forces. Incoming from 3 directions. Heavy weapons, full tactical deployment. Ian looked around the laboratory, calculating distances, timing, and possibilities. They could escape, probably. The charges would detonate in minutes, destroying the immediate threat. But the research data existed in multiple locations, and other facilities would continue the work. More importantly, Ian realized something that chilled him more than the prospect of his own death. This wouldn't end here. The enhanced world would rebuild, relocate, continue their genocidal project with renewed determination. Elena's death, the Resistance's sacrifice, all of it would be meaningless if the fundamental system survived. Get the team out, he ordered. Ian, what are you? Sarah Lynn had appeared in the laboratory doorway, her face desperate with understanding. Get them out. I'm staying. You can't. The explosion won't be big enough to matter. They'll just rebuild somewhere else. Not if I breach the main processing systems. Ian was already moving, gathering additional explosives from their supply cache. This facility connects to the enhanced district's chemical infrastructure. If I can create a cascade failure. Understanding dawned on the faces around him. The explosion wouldn't just destroy the laboratory. It would devastate the entire industrial complex that maintained enhanced society. Chemical processing plants, genetic modification facilities, enhancement production centers, all of it connected through systems that had never been designed to contain this level of destruction. Ian, no, Sarah's voice broke. The casualty count, there are tens of thousands of people in that district. Enhanced and natural, civilians and military. You're talking about mass murder. I'm talking about stopping genocide, Ian replied, his voice perfectly calm. But even as he spoke, he could feel something fundamental shifting inside him. The last vestiges of the man who'd fallen in love with Elena Torres were burning away, leaving behind something harder and infinitely more dangerous. This isn't what Elena would have wanted, Sarah said desperately. She believed in justice, not vengeance. She'd want you to find another way. Ian paused in his preparations, thinking about Elena reading in the park, Elena laughing at his awkward jokes, Elena believing that love could survive in an impossible world. For 8 months, she'd been his anchor to humanity, the proof that something good could exist despite the enhanced world's cruelty. Elena is dead, he said finally. She died believing that people could change, that justice was possible through peaceful means. They killed that belief, along with everything else that made her who she was. So you're going to prove them right? Become the monster they always said naturals were? Ian looked at his friend, this woman who'd led him into the resistance, and watched him transform from a heartbroken lover into something barely recognizable as human. The question hung in the air between them, demanding an answer he wasn't sure he could give. But then he thought about the viral weapons and their sealed containers, designed to exterminate every person who shared Elena's genetic heritage. He thought about Vincent Hale's casual cruelty, the collection networks, the systematic dehumanization that the enhanced world had built into their perfect society. "I became the monster they needed me to be," he said quietly. "Ian, please." Sarah stepped closer, her voice carrying all the desperation of someone watching a friend cross a line from which there could be no return. "There has to be another way. We can expose this, broadcast the evidence, turn enhanced society against itself, without what? Without making them pay a real price for what they've done?" Ian's calm facade cracked slightly, revealing the rage that had been building since Elena's death. "They took everything from me, Sarah. Everything that made life worth living. And now they want to take it from everyone like me, everyone like Elena, everyone who reminds them that genetic perfection isn't the same as human worth." The explosions outside were getting closer. Enhanced military forces were breaching the facility's outer defenses, moving methodically toward the laboratory complex. In minutes, they would be captured or killed, and the genocide weapons would remain intact. "You want another way?" Ian asked, attaching the final charges to the chemical processing conduits. "Here's another way. Stop them permanently. Make sure they can never again decide that some people deserve to live and others deserve to die, based on their genetic makeup. By committing genocide yourself? By choosing who gets to survive." Ian's voice was ice cold now, empty of everything except purpose. Them or us. Enhanced or natural. The people who created this system or the people who suffered under it. Sarah stared at him for a long moment, perhaps finally understanding that the Ian Blackwood she'd known was gone, consumed by grief and rage until only vengeance remained. "Elena loved you," she said finally. "She'd want you to remember what that felt like." "I remember," Ian replied, his hand hovering over the detonation controls. "I remember what it felt like to believe that love was possible in an impossible world. I remember what it felt like to hope that people could change, that justice could prevail, that good could triumph over evil through peaceful means." He thought about Elena's smile, her stubborn optimism, her refusal to accept that genetic differences justified social hierarchy. She'd seen beauty in imperfection, found meaning in struggle, created light in the darkest corners of their world. And they'd killed her for it. "I remember all of it," Ian continued. "Every moment of happiness, every reason to hope, every proof that humanity was worth saving. They took it all away. So now they get to find out what the world looks like, when someone like me stops believing in their humanity." The laboratory door exploded inward, as enhanced military forces breached the final defenses. Ian saw their perfect faces, their optimized features, their confident assumption that their genetic superiority would protect them from anything a natural could devise. He smiled as he triggered the detonation sequence. The explosions began with the laboratory charges, destroying the immediate weapons cache and research data. But Ian's modifications ensured that the destruction didn't stop there. Chemical processing systems throughout the enhanced district began failing in cascade, each breach triggering larger failures that spread like wildfire through the interconnected infrastructure. The enhanced district's industrial sector disappeared in a pillar of fire that could be seen from orbit. But the destruction didn't end with the weapons facility. Enhancement production centers, genetic modification laboratories, rating system servers, all of the technological infrastructure that maintained enhanced society's superiority went up in flames. Ian died in that explosion, along with the weapons that would have exterminated natural humanity and the enhanced individuals who had created them. His last conscious thought was of Elena, not as she'd been in Hale's captivity, but as she'd existed in those perfect months when they'd found light in a dark world. The explosion's aftermath reshaped everything. The enhanced world, faced with the complete destruction of their technological capacity and the death of thousands of their most productive citizens, could no longer maintain their perfect society. Military forces, stretched beyond capacity and demoralized by the loss of their genetic advantages, began defecting to the integrated resistance movement. More importantly, the enhanced population finally understood what Ian had been trying to tell them all along, that systems built on oppression inevitably consume everyone within them, oppressor and oppressed alike. The biological weapons program died with Ian, but his final message lived on in the broadcast that followed the explosion. Video testimony he'd recorded weeks earlier, explaining his actions and their necessity, distributed through networks that no authority could shut down. "They made us believe that genetic differences meant some people deserved to suffer and die so others could live in perfection," his image said from screens across the world. Elena Torres died because she fell in love with someone they considered genetically inferior. How many others will die before we admit that the only real difference between enhanced and natural humans is that some of us forgot how to be human? The revolution that followed wasn't the violent uprising Ian had originally envisioned, but something more complex and ultimately more effective. Enhanced individuals, confronted with the logical endpoint of their genetic apartheid, began dismantling the systems that had maintained their superiority. But the cost had been enormous. The enhanced district lay in ruins, its perfect towers collapsed, its gleaming surfaces blackened by fires that burned for weeks. Tens of thousands were dead, enhanced and natural alike, casualties of a war that had finally revealed its true nature. Sarah Lynn, now leading a coalition government that included both enhanced and natural representatives, stood at the memorial erected where the industrial district had once gleamed. The names of the dead covered the entire structure, enhanced and natural alike, all of them casualties of a war that should never have been necessary. "He was my friend," she told the crowd gathered for the memorial's dedication. Not a hero, not a martyr, just a man who loved someone they killed and refused to pretend that was acceptable. History will argue about his methods, his choices, his final actions. But history should remember this. In a world designed to make love impossible, Elena Torres and Ian Blackwood found each other. And that was the beginning of everything that came after. The memorial stood for 50 years, a reminder of the price paid for the world that emerged from the ashes of genetic apartheid. But it also stood as a warning about what happened when love turned to hate, when hope transformed into vengeance, when the oppressed became the oppressor. Ian Blackwood had saved natural humanity from extinction, but he'd done so by embracing the very monster he'd once fought against. In the end, Elena's death hadn't just taken away the light in his world. It had extinguished the light in him, leaving behind someone capable of choosing mass destruction over the possibility of redemption. The new world that rose from the ruins was more just, more equal, more humane than what had come before. But it was built on foundations of ash and blood, a reminder that even the most necessary revolutions exact a price that echoes through generations. In the end, love had proven possible in an impossible world. But sometimes, the price of making that world possible was becoming impossible yourself.